Good day. Hello, welcome. My name is Umar. Today is the 7th of May 2020, and this is our second session following the updates and the impact that the COVID-19 has had on the immigration system in the UK. Today you're joined by Mr. Abdullah Khurram, who is an immigration practitioner, a leader and specialist in immigration law, practicing in this field for well over a decade. Due to the previous video, we have had positive feedback from yourself. However, because of the information that is coming, we're going to try to keep this video shorter and more targeted to the topic and more useful for your viewing and knowledge. This video is brought to you by Khurram & Co. Solicitors, and today's topic is all about students. Over to Mr. Khurram. Mr. Khurram, can you hear me?
Yeah, hello. Yes, I can hear you. Well, thank you again for volunteering to host this short video. Really, this topic today is very important, particularly because, in my view, it could be said that students have perhaps suffered the most under the hostile environment, historic and ongoing hostile environment of the government in relation to lawful migrants to the UK. You will be well aware that students originally came to the UK. Generally speaking, they could have their dependents here with them. Generally speaking, they were given permission to work for a certain amount of hours. And of course, if they'd been here long enough, then they could apply for settled status on the 10-year long residence route. However, as time went by, the government changed and made it much more difficult for students, for example, to have their dependents here, students to work alongside their studies here, and of course, students were limited to the amount or the maximum amount of time that they could stay in the UK, so that they could never reach the 10-year long residence requirement. Therefore, it's very important to provide said students with an update of what the position is so far as COVID is concerned, and because they will certainly be confused and worried if their visas are coming to an end, or if they haven't been able to finish their studies and they need to extend, etc., etc. So it's a very good topic, and thank you for choosing this for today.
Thank you, Mr. Khurram, for taking out the time to join us today. Could you tell us a little bit more about the concessions and the updates the Home Office has made for students?
Yes, of course. So basically what's happened is that the Home Office released a guidance document, and perhaps, Omar, if possible, we can put it into the link of this video so that people can connect to it and get to it and read it themselves. It relates to coronavirus and student visas as of actually late of April this year. And what it does is it covers a number of temporary immigration concessions for those on Tier 4 students, and also in relation to short-term student visas as well, which perhaps I'll talk about closer to the end. Interestingly, what the Home Office say is these will be withdrawn once the situation returns to normal. So don't expect it to be ongoing for any length of time. The main points in relation to students, individual students on Tier 4, is that distance learning is now permitted. So depending on the college, and if they facilitate distance learning, then you can continue your studies by way of distance learning. Students who need to repeat a year, now this is very important, or retake a module or resit an exam, are exempt from demonstrating academic progression as would normally have applied for any extension. So in effect, previously, one of the requirements for a student to apply for an extension to continue his studies was to show that he had progressed academically, he had passed his exams, or he's passed part of his course, etc., etc. However, in light of what's happening at the moment, and exams being cancelled and colleges being closed down and universities changing their formats and so on, that requirement of demonstrating academic progression, students are now exempt from that. And if they haven't been able to complete their year, or if they need to retake a module or resit an exam, they're exempt from having to demonstrate academic progression in relation to that. There are a few other things as well. For example, if a student has to register at the police station, that's been suspended. Working hours, the 20-hour-a-week restriction has been lifted, but in particular that relates to doctors, nurses, paramedics, and those whose sponsor, as in the college or university or the educational establishment, has suspended all study. So this is a very important one, actually, which relates to the usual restriction of term time working hours of 20 hours at most. That restriction has been lifted for doctors, nurses, and paramedics, and where the college or the educational establishment has suspended all study. Volunteering, generally speaking, wasn't allowed in the past, but it has been permitted for NHS volunteers, responders, and of course, students have to follow social distancing because this applies to everybody else. A couple of other things. In relation to time limits, discretion may be applied, is what the Home Office say. If someone applies for an extension that would take them over the normal maximum period allowed on a Tier 4 general visa. So what I was talking about earlier, where you can only be studying at graduate level for a certain amount of time, or postgraduate level for a certain amount of time, and then you can't apply for further extensions. That has been, that might be, maybe is the word that they used according to their discretion, that might be relaxed so that the normal maximum period allowed is relaxed. But again, this is at the discretion. This is not something that will automatically come about. Right to rent checks. So if you're a student and you're living in accommodation where you have to provide evidence and so on that you're allowed to be in the UK, that can be done remotely now. So the landlord doesn't need to physically take your original document. So that's in relation specifically to Tier 4 changes. And as I always say, please do check the up-to-date changes and concessions. Some might be taken out, some might be extended, some might be expanded. You should always check what's available at the specific time.
Thank you for that, Mr. Khurram. How about short-term students? What updates and what concessions has the Home Office made for them?
Right. Yeah, with regards to short-term students, this is something that we did discuss a little on the last session with regards to switching whilst in the UK. So in-country switching, normally a short-term student, for example, if they've come to the UK just to study the English language, they're expected to be for a period which is over 6 months but less than a year. And at the end of that period, short-term students are expected and must return to their home country, and if they want to follow up with further studies, apply for re-entry into the UK. But what's happening at the moment is that in terms of in-country switching, Tier 4 short-term students will be allowed on an exceptional basis until at least 31st of May 2020 to switch in country, because obviously they can't leave the country to make the application for re-entry. Insofar as permitted studies, short-term students who've been given this extension of leave in this category as a result of the COVID-19, they will be able to study on further courses, and even if they are other than the ones that they originally entered the UK to undertake. So, for example, if they came here to study English and afterwards they want to study something different, they can switch into that other one in country if they've been given this exceptional extension of leave. Right. What needs to be taken into account, though, is this extending of short-term study leave is not catered for, specifically speaking, under the immigration rules. So it would need to be an application for leave outside of the rules, which notoriously is difficult or can cause complications. However, it's some respite for those students who perhaps didn't plan on staying here, but planned on going back and then reapplying to continue their studies in the UK. So for those ones, then at least they will know that they're not going to lose out on their study period and can actually make the application in the UK.
Thank you for that, Mr. Khurram. That is going to be the end of our session for today. As promised, we're keeping it short and concise. I'd like to thank Mr. Khurram for his time, taking the time out to join us on this session. And our next session will be on asylum law and targeted for refugees and asylum seekers. So definitely join us again for that one. Mr. Khurram, again, thank you for taking the time out, and hopefully we'll see you very soon.
Yeah, well, thank you as well, Umar, for volunteering to host this. I'm sure everyone is grateful to get some clarity in these difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you, and stay safe.